I am later this month starting full-time in the Chief Program Officer role here after a not insignificant move from my 20-year home of Washington, D.C. And so many of you have been kind enough to share your stories of big moves in your life and big transitions. And so I think there is some shared empathy for change. I will say change is a theme that I've spent a lot of time thinking about in the last couple months as I have met so many more of the Nashville team. I am definitely new to Nashville. I am not new to change. And the thing that I think has been really inspiring and attractive and has made me so excited about this opportunity is the wholesome way in which this community has embraced an opportunity to evoke tremendous change. And just looking through the backgrounds and the expertise of each of the people sitting here today, it has really given me such confidence that this change will be ushered in by a passionate, dedicated, enthusiastic, and committed team. I feel very lucky to be walking into a role filled with supporters both on the committee side and of course on the professional staff side, so many of which are here today. And so I wanted to start with a thank you, because I am new to the community and this is unique. This is a really, really special moment. And last week, many of us were at NACDO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, which was in Washington, D.C. Kendra and Derek joined me up there. And if I tell you, every single person, as soon as they found out I was moving to Nashville, immediately their faces lit up and they said, "Oh my God, Nashville, you're doing it. Like, you're really doing it." And that was just a really special experience. They then had a million questions about how we did it and what comes next and how far along we are and what about the projects. But you should know there are people from around this country who are so envious and excited for the journey that Nashville has already embarked on. I think it's an honor to have been asked by the mayor to be a part of this journey. And I'm really looking forward to spending time with each of you as we do this. And so what I'd like to sort of start with, and I think Michael gave everyone a little heads up, is one of the big roles that this committee will play in the coming years is helping to tell the Choose How You Move story. And telling the story of the program and of the transition this community is going through must be interwoven and laced with telling all of your stories. Because it was your story that brought each of you to the chair you're sitting in today. It's your story that made you a part of the community that is evoking this change. And as you talk through what change is coming, you'll see it from your lens. And so I'm very excited. We're going to run through and, we've, I think, gotten a couple stories from Metro staff that we'll also highlight. You have, I believe, a copy of the agenda in front of you, and we have a lot of ground to cover in 2 hours. We're going to do our best to keep everyone running on schedule. And the team, who has obviously spent way more time working on Chime to date, led by Kendra and Michael, will walk us through all of the deep dives that we have in front of you. Thank you for your patience as I transition and learn and grow and catch up to all the work that's already happened. I promise I will be up to at least a waddle in the next couple weeks and then eventually a run. So I want to sort of dive into stories and just, there's a couple here highlighted for you. You may know some of these stories, but I'm going to start by telling you mine. And there are two components to mine. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner, and it's small, and it is not very well done. But I will tell you a strange story, which is my transportation story is an accident. I moved to Washington 20 years ago because I wanted to work in education or healthcare. But the market was such that I got a job in transportation, and I immediately thought, well, I can pivot, right? Like, government is government. I'll do a little bit of this and then I'll move. And I very quickly fell in love with transportation because the education policy and healthcare policy does not matter if you can't physically access it. And I learned that very quickly and sort of started my career at USDOT. But a thing I didn't realize was when you go back way early in history, my first grade class was the opening class at our elementary school. It was a brand new neighborhood in Southern California called Foothill Ranch, and we were the stars of this school opening. And so they had asked everyone in first grade, will you draw a tile that will get installed on the first wall when you walk into the courtyard at this elementary school? And my mother is an artist. I quite obviously missed those genes. My brother got them. And so I sort of remember that I had done this exercise where I got to paint what I thought of our new community. We moved from California 11 years later to upstate New York, where I went to middle school and high school in Rochester. Very different than Southern California, I will say. And about 3 years ago, my family and I went back to Southern California just to visit, and we thought it'd be fun to swing through the elementary school. And I remembered, oh my God, I have a tile. I remember doing that. I don't remember where on the wall it is, but I remember a tile. And so my family and I are walking through the courtyard, and we're looking, and we find the one tile that says Sabrina in big letters. So this is quite obviously mine. The thing that you can't quite see, because it's small and on the screen, is that this is actually a vision of a complete street. There is a sign that says speed limit. There's a sign that says be safe. There are birds, and there are multiple uses happening on the roadway in front of you. I was standing and looking at it, and my brother, literally before I could even get a word out, said, oh my God, it's always been there. And so apparently my story starts quite young and quite organically. But this is the vision I had built. I think in a little while, maybe if you sort of squint with one eye, it'll look like a street here in Nashville. We'll see. We can check in on that. The other thing I'll share with this group that is a big part of my story is I am also the survivor of a very bad hit and run crash. I was a pedestrian, and I had gone out for a run, and the person was going about 15 miles over the 25 speed limit, and I went up onto the roof of the car, down the window shield, across the hood, and got thrown. She thankfully put the car in reverse as she ran from the incident, but that day did change my life. And I was in transportation before that day, and I cared about street safety, but as many of you know, safety stories change the way you look at things, particularly if it affects you or your family. And so that was now 12 years ago, and I was frankly exceedingly lucky for an unknown set of reasons. I had a couple surgeries and a long recovery, spent 2.5 years in physical therapy, but went from wheelchair to learning how to run again. And that is a part of who I am. And that is a part of what made me one of the founding members of Family for Safe Streets in Washington, D.C., and a huge professional and personal advocate for Vision Zero. And so the thing that I want each of you to also know is that this is not just academic in my life. It's real. And I'm so thankful to be working with this group of people because I know for each of you, it's not just academic, it's real. And I know that for the team as well. What I'd love to do is maybe go around and maybe we'll start with Kendra and then Michael. And I'd love for you to tell us your transportation story. I took a little long, so I apologize, but it's sort of, I'm brand new. So Kendra?
Good morning. Excited to be here with you all. My name is Kendra Apkowitz. I'm acting program director of Choose How You Move. As you can see here on this slide, one of my fond transportation stories is cross-country trips, all packed into one vehicle as a kid. And so I remember taking multiple of these. We even mixed in some different modes. So there was a time we drove from Nashville to Chicago and then took the train from Chicago to Denver. And so remember, again, being with family while riding in transportation. And then I'll share a nice little vignette from this morning. So there are 6 of us in my current household, and we are down to 1 car. Usually we have 2 cars, and so we were able to make it to 4 different locations all before 8 a.m. this morning. And so it was actually really fun, like my memories as a kid, to be packed like sardines into our car this morning and go everywhere together.
Thanks, Kendra. Good to see many of you as well. So I'm Michael Briggs, Deputy Chief Program Officer for Choose How You Move. And the slide changed, so you'll see part of my story. So while in college at Western Kentucky, a impaired driver ran the red light, T-boned us, and I'm just very grateful that he did not hit the side door that I was on, because I probably would have been seriously hurt At the time, it was maybe 2 blocks away from where we lived. My roommate was in the car and broke his ribs, and we walked home from that wreck. And it's one of those things that it taught me also access to a vehicle. So being in Bowling Green, we didn't have good transit. And so my parents had to step in and utilize their car until it was replaced. So it kind of taught both safety to me. I still wait to this day at traffic signals when it turns green, just waiting on a vehicle to run a red light. And probably, prompted me to really get into more transportation safety early in my career. But then also taught me how access is super important, and was fortunate to have, a family that's able to step in and provide an additional vehicle in that instance. So, do we want to go around the room now?
Yeah, maybe we'll start with Walt. So was he.
And everyone, just a quick reminder, make sure you use your microphone when you speak, otherwise the audio won't be picked up by our recording.
Yeah, I spent a couple of rodeos in this place monthly. Transit, I guess, for me begins, I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, on a rectangular grid where we had mass transit every 8 blocks, both north and south and east and west. And so we actually could take it for granted. My parents had one car. They both worked. They worked in different places. My mother never had a driver's license, never had a problem getting to and from work. It was just a no-brainer. Mass transit was, a birthright. And so coming to Nashville as a 19-year-old to go to college was an interesting cultural shift, to say the least. I did have a vehicle, 1959 MGA Coupe, red, but after a couple of trips back home, it died. And I was faced with the reality of Nashville is not very transit friendly. Roll the tape forward, and I wind up being appointed by Mayor Berry to the Metro Transit Authority Board, which subsequently became WEGO. And I served in that capacity for, Steve, 9 years? 8 years? Something like that. And really got a good sense of the deficiencies in our mass transit system, the need for such, and particularly for persons like me who have various impairments and require, who cannot drive, but nevertheless are in need of crisscrossing the community on a regular and consistent basis. So that kind of edifies both my experience and my view of what we need going forward. And I also served on the predecessor of this body, and am welcome the opportunity to continue to serve in that regard.
Thank you.
Good morning. My transportation story is, first of all, to sit next to Mr. Searcy, and I've known him for years, and today to find out that he's from Chicago, as am I. I'm born and raised in Chicago with that same robust transit system in Chicago, using that system to get to and from work, my mother and father. My mother used the system even though she was the one who knew how to drive. I would take my mother's car and take my father to work. But understanding that in 1980, I worked for Chicago Transit Authority as a bus cleaner. I wasn't the best worker that they had, and I was separated from that employment only to move to several other opportunities because opportunities could continue to show up. Coming to Nashville in 2002, I began to work here for the then MTA, and now WeGo Public Transit as a bus operator, and 7 months later, I was promoted to operations supervisor. They wanted to know when I came in the door, how did driving a bus fit into my life, because I had worked as a substance abuse counselor, HIV education, risk reduction, and behavior modification specialist in the jail system in Illinois. And it gave me an insight to the opportunities for people separating from the penal system and how important it is for a new opportunity. And with the manpower shortages that transit experiences more often than not because of the challenges associated with being a bus operator on to the chief executive officer, the challenges is trying to have enough people to provide the service that's necessary. So I've been highly interested in the not so much a second chance, but another chance for people to have gainful employment, because that was the one thing that I can say in Chicago, though it was patronage hiring a lot of times, and the Shackman decree later dissolved that opportunity. Well, it didn't dissolve it, it modified that opportunity, but a lot of people came from those systems and were able to get gainful employment and provide for their families. And if we don't provide a way for them to provide for their families, their second chance will be the opportunity that they took advantage of that put them in that system. So that's really important to me, and I've been working in transit for the last 19 years. And I've enjoyed working in transit. I watched it as it matured from where we were in 2006 to where we are now. And I'd like to continue to see that growth happen.
Good morning. My name is Wesley Smith. I think part of my transit story is like a lot of Nashvillians. I'm from a part of Nashville where I felt safe as a kid walking and biking on my street, but wasn't really able to go far beyond that. Kind of lived off a windy country road, River Road, if you know West Nashville. And so, yeah, you don't do anything but drive on River Road. And that was my experience. And then I went to Hume Fogg High School, and so it was kind of living in these two worlds of during the day I was downtown and had access to public transit and could walk to my sports practices after school, and then was home and again, dependent on a car. And so, like many people, went to college and was introduced to a walkable community. And really the only time I used my car in college was to get home or to get groceries, I guess. But what's fresh on the mind, and part of my transportation story, my family is from the Netherlands, and I just got back from 2 weeks there. I hadn't been there in 7 years, and so it was my first time returning as a professional. And I was just struck by how the Netherlands is known for biking infrastructure, obviously. I didn't get on a bike the entire time I was there. I walked, I took the bus, I took the streetcar, I took the metro, and I took trains everywhere I went. It was actually, I think we actually, believe it or not, have better bike share in Nashville than they do in Amsterdam. So there's a win. So I guess the resonant word for me from the introduction is change and the opportunity for our streets to be transformed. And I know that, when we build complete streets, that is the foundation for a fantastic transportation system, but it's also the foundation for our built environment as a whole, for the land uses that we have. And I think that transportation is key to, equity and justice and all of those things. But also simply it's key to just a happy life and quality of life. And, being in a city where you want to stop and talk to your neighbor and you have those opportunities because you have a great public transit system. So I'm excited for the opportunity that we're building here in Nashville.
Hello, I'm Angie Henderson. I am Vice Mayor of Nashville and President of the Metro Council. I served on the Metro Council for 8 years in district service, all that time on the Public Works Committee with Board Member Young. And once as chair of that committee, we now call the Public Works Committee the Transportation Infrastructure. I am a native Nashvilleian, and in most of my childhood, I lived in a high-rise on West End Avenue, and not quite every weekend, every other weekend with my parents, I took the bus downtown to the downtown library to get our batch of books, and I really enjoyed that, go to a Tom Titchener puppet show. And that was very much a formative part of my childhood. After living in that high rise, it was transit accessible. We moved to a more suburban, rural area, like Wesley, off of Granny White Pike, a really stone's throw from the Radnor Lake State Natural Area. And shortly after moving there and starting to get very confident in my bike skills in my driveway, my family thought it would be a good idea to bike down to Radnor Lake. And I mean, truly very close by. It was the most harrowing, scary experience. Deep ditches, almost being sideswiped. It was very scary. And we never biked on that street ever again for the whole, maybe 7 or 8 years that I lived there. So I am very conscious of the fact that, especially for a city as kind of sprawled and car dependent and sizable as Nashville, that our bikeways are very important connections both to transit and schools and all our kind of cultural and natural assets. And we have a lot of potential there, but we have a lot of understandable kind of fear for lack of that infrastructure. So that's one part of my story that continues to motivate me to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I am going to jump in and introduce someone who needs no introduction in this room, but we've been joined by the mayor. And I will just say as I was telling everyone earlier last week at NACDO, folks are very excited, obviously, about what's happening in Nashville, and very excited about the leadership that the mayor has shown in getting us to today. And so with that, I will just turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Sabrina. This is, I guess, the most important words I'll say today are thank you. Thank you for agreeing to participate in this community-driven component of our transit improvement program. I think many of you will already be familiar with the original dream team of Michael Briggs and Kendra Abkowitz, and they have now been joined by Sabrina Sussman, who we're delighted to have with us in person today and who will be full-time in our office leading the implementation of Choose How You Move. Of course, I know Steve Bland, Diane Alarcon are here, and I think the importance of WeGo and NDOT to implementation can't be overstated, but I think as we've watched leadership emerge within Metro and affiliated entities, watching ITS, who we need for fiber, NES, who we need for other utility coordination, similarly Metro Water. We know Metro Schools is a critically important partner in this. And then, of course, all of you, the geographies of Nashville that you represent, the communities of Nashville that you represent. This advisory committee on transportation is so important, and I think with our office and Michael and Kendra before, I think you knew that we had a technical advisory committee focusing on development of the policy that went into the Choose How You Move program, and then we also had a community advisory committee that focused on how that policy translated into on-the-ground improvements. At this point, I think with Sabrina and the coordination effort, the Metro departments, including planning, that are going to be focused on implementation of the policy. Now we are kind of doubling down starting today on how the community involvement process works and making sure we get not just the larger scale all access corridors in this program, right, but even specific intersections that the places that have the greatest touch points in neighborhoods and for communities across the city are going to be so important. But I think to Sabrina's point, one of the most important things here is that when the U.S. Department of Transportation, not long after we were successful at the ballot, came here to celebrate some news at the newly constructed Rip Patton North Nashville Community Transit Center, they called us a beacon for the country. And so that's one of the things that you all are getting to participate in, is making sure that we not just meet, but ideally exceed the expectations for offering people the freedom that we know comes from infrastructure choices and service delivery for how you move around the city. I hope most of you are familiar with my own transportation story, but I think you'll know too, this is not the first time we tried to get dedicated funding for transit and infrastructure, but this is the time when we have secured it. And so we have already seen some great successes. Kendra, in her interim role, guiding this program with support again from WEGO and NDOT, have got us to the first 11 foundational projects, which is very exciting that even before we get through the end of this fiscal year, they are funded. And so those are things like this past weekend where we got to expand access on demand for WEGO. We know that July 6th coming up are more improvements to service frequency coming from WEGO. We know that fiber is being installed right now to improve traffic signals. We know that Jefferson Street and Gallatin and Main are corridor improvements that are underway. We've got design for new infrastructure coming that supports both transit and pedestrians and cyclists and motorists in this city. And all of this is because hundreds of thousands of us came together in November to say, yes, we know we need to do this, and we also want to do this together. So it's a really important moment. You all are going to be offering input throughout. We need your ideas, feedback, concerns, and engagement. And we also want to continue talking about this throughout the community. We want Nashvillians to not just see their half penny at work, but have the opportunity to experience it, whether they're walking on a newly constructed sidewalk or taking transit they never expected to use because suddenly it is more available, more convenient, more affordable. We're launching later this year our first ever low-income fare program. And so that's another key part of this, is making sure that all of the things that are on maps and nice visualizations in the program document come to life in ways that people can really experience. And so all of your collective wisdom is going to be important to that. All of the things that we know are possible for ages and abilities, for where people live throughout the city as we upgrade 600 intersections across the city, as we offer 86 miles of sidewalk, as we get to 24/7, 365 availability of transit access, and as we make the city and the service levels ever safer. You all will be a key part of that. And so I'm very excited to be here with you this morning for this kickoff, and look forward to continuing to work with you all for years as we get Choose How You Move off the ground and up and running, and give people more choice about how they move around the city. So thank you all for being here today and being a part of this process. Great to be with you.
Okay, Gracie, I think we're at you.
Okay, well, that was quite a tough act to follow, but I am so excited to be here today. My name is Gracie Sloan, and I'm a rising junior at Vanderbilt University. I'm born and raised in Nashville, and I will never live anywhere else. I love this city. I have a deep passion for seeing how transit is quickly becoming a huge and integral part of how the city grows. And I would say that my transit story is twofold. So I have spastic diplegic cerebral palsy, and I use a rollator walker or a wheelchair to get around a lot. So I've had quite the experience with different challenges getting around, and learning about transit being such a big part of that as I moved to college and beyond in my life. So obviously a very personal component as to how important it is to have ways to get around for people of all ages and abilities. But also I've been able to see the need for transit through the lens of becoming a college student and meeting so many people from around the world that come to Nashville and say, I love your city, but where's the transit? and not really, just now beginning to have an answer to that question, and ways to show people who are moving here and excited to live here, ways to get involved and see those changes happening right as I am living in the heart of the city at Vanderbilt's campus. So being able to see that from 2 points of view, as well as I recently began using a adaptive bike to be able to get around for the first time in my life at 21 years old, and it's been an amazing experience, but also a frightening experience at times because of the breaks in connection between different transit areas, between where I grew up in Westmead, the Westmead area, to downtown and Vanderbilt's campus area. So I've seen transit through multiple lenses, but I can't tell you how exciting it is to be here and see so many different people from different walks of life telling their stories as well, and being able to watch my story grow alongside Nashville's story. So thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Kaylin Russell. I'm the advocacy manager at the Equity Alliance. In grad school, I was able to study the interconnections of affordable housing, transportation, and then quality of life. And then also while I was studying, I was able to intern at the National Multimodal department here. And I thought that was really interesting to be able to see up close some of the decisions that are made around city planning. And then recently, as advocacy manager, we were able to learn more about this campaign and advocate for it, and I really enjoyed that experience. But with my lived experience in 2020, I lived in Antioch and was working completely remotely, and I really enjoyed Antioch. And then in 2021, I got a hybrid job, and I had to commute downtown, and that took a toll on my free time in the evening. And so learning the difference between being able to have more autonomy over your out-of-work hours than out of the time you have to spend commuting, which can be an hour to an hour and a half, depending on where you live, really impairs how you're able to experience a greater quality of life and then make decisions around what kind of events you will attend in Nashville. So in those times, I was really preoccupied, like with weekends and evening decisions. Oh, if I got invited to an event or a learning opportunity, I would say, if I'm going, I'll have to stay there the rest of the day, or I'm home for the day. And so that kind of impaired how I was navigating and enjoying my experience. Last year, I moved a little bit closer into the city and cut my transportation time in about half. And so I enjoy the freedom it gives me to be able to, I like the word crisscross that you use, crisscross around the city to enjoy different things. And I think access to opportunity, including education, recreation, and then just communal activities is something that everyone should enjoy. So I'm excited to be a part of this committee and kind of advocate for the opportunities for all Nashvillians to be able to enjoy all of the things that this great city has to offer.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ashley Northington. I am a fourth-generation Nashvillian, and I grew up here with a lot of misconceptions about public transportation, that it wasn't safe, that it was unreliable, or that it was for a certain class of people. But I really began to get engaged in the transit conversation when, in 2017, as a small business owner, I began to really understand how important transit was to putting everyone on a path to economic prosperity. This point was driven home by an experience I had trying to hire a young person who had just moved back to Nashville from Washington, D.C. to care for her ailing mother. This person was at the end of her rope, and at the end of our interview process, she asked me to buy her a car. Now, that seems pretty outrageous, but this person was very desperate, trying to figure out how to negotiate and navigate around the city to make her life work without having a vehicle. And so I began to realize, if a stranger is willing to ask another complete stranger to buy them a car, what are the rest of our neighbors experiencing? What barriers do they face when trying to access opportunity and necessity? And so that's when I got off the sidelines and got engaged in the transit conversation. And since 2017, I have served on then Mayor Megan Berry's Task Force for Transit and Affordability. I've graduated from the Transit Citizen Leadership Academy. I've served on Mayor O'Connell's transition team for his Nashville Moves Committee. I've served on Mayor O'Connell's McConnell's Transportation Advisory Committee for the Choose How You Move campaign. And today, since 2022, I am the chair of Moving Forward of Middle Tennessee, which is a group of business owners who are passionate about advocating and identifying regional mobility solutions that work for Middle Tennesseans. So excited to be here. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Carlett. I'm with the Urban Land Institute in Nashville. My transportation story, I think, actually begins when I moved back to Nashville when I was 25. I was working on a campaign to get more children enrolled in TennCare, a model in the nation at that time. And we were working in Nashville, Memphis, and 2 small rural communities. And part of our messaging was telling parents, you know, you really ought to have your kids exercise more and eat healthier. And then I'd go out to the neighborhoods that we were working in, and I quickly felt very disingenuous, saying that they should eat healthier, be more active, when the way their community was set up didn't facilitate any of that, made it harder. And so after going back to grad school, I came to Nashville. I worked for a time in the Metro Planning Department. I worked for a time at the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce. During that time, we did the 2018 campaign, learned a lot from that, wrote a debrief that was like a great little bout of therapy. And now I work at the Urban Land Institute with everybody related to commercial real estate, from architects and developers, brokers, and land use lawyers. And the interest among that group in building neighborhoods and communities that provide access is huge. And it feels very full circle to me to be coming back now and talking about how we can build something that creates access. I want to make one more point on my journey. After that transit campaign failed, we could have all picked up our marbles and gone home. And instead, I felt like I really watched WeGo kind of double down on decision-making for how they were going to make the resources they had the best that they could. That is, I think, about the time that they started working a lot on access or showing access maps. If we add this service for this time at this frequency, these are all the more people that can have access to jobs and education and day-to-day necessities. That's when we as a city started NDOT. And a lot of proof of concept, I think, happened between 2018 and the election, the referendum. And so I think the package before the community was very attractive. I think the pain point was there. But also, I think as a city, we had shown in small and large ways, we can do big things. You can entrust us with some money, and we're going to go build the good things that help our community. And so I'm so excited to be part of kind of the continuing transportation journey here.
Well, good morning. My name is Morgan Renberg, and I'm the Vice President of Exhibits and Experiences at Adventure Science Center. When I was 23, I was sitting in a doctor's office and got a diagnosis of a genetic condition that has eventually left me legally blind. And so I'll start off by saying I apologize if it takes me a little while to learn your names. I can't see your name tags, but we'll get there. But I had driven myself to that doctor's appointment, and I called my dad and said I needed to come pick me up, and I never got in a car again, or never got behind the wheel of a car again. And so it certainly has taken some life changes to adapt to that. I live downtown now, even though maybe it's a little pricey. Maybe my wife would like to have a garden, but it lets me walk to work. It's the only place in town that is both sort of walkable and has a density of transit availability that gives me some independence. And what I found making those changes is, even though maybe that wasn't what I was always planning to do, there's been just such tremendous upside for doing that. And what I'm hoping from all of this is that we make more places like that available to more of our fellow citizens. Because right now you've got to be pretty well off to live that opportunity. And I think, it shouldn't be that way. And so I'm hopeful that as this program continues and we make these improvements, there'll be more parts of town where folks can live and get around without a vehicle and not have to, pay tremendous amount to have that privilege. So really exciting to be here and thrilled by all the amazing people that are part of this committee.
Good morning. My name is Rashad Fakhruddin. Honored to be here with y'all in this committee. It's so important. I moved to Nashville as a kid back in 1970, and originally from Bangladesh. And my profession, been working at Nashville Electric Service for the last 30 years, supervised one of their departments, and my background is in engineering, Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech. I do love sports, and that's why I'm sad today, because Vanderbilt, the Vandy boys somehow lost their #1 seed. And love exercising, love playing sports, and love community engagement. With all that said, my transportation story is growing up as a kid in the 70s and 80s in the Hillwood area. There was nowhere to bike except going up and down my hill driveway. And nowhere to walk. If you wanted to just go to the neighborhoods or to the stores, you had to depend on transportation. In high school, I played a lot of sports from middle school through high school. Depended on my mom to take me to practice until I was able to drive. In fact, I remember I went 2 years to MBA, and I had to skip out on playing football, which was my dream, because I didn't have transportation. My mom was in Bangladesh at the time. And so, and regarding just bike lanes as a kid, nowhere to ride, when I went to Hillsborough and played tennis, after I graduated, one of my classmates, my teammates, was killed in riding his bike near Hillsborough High School a few years afterwards. And they couldn't identify him except by his fingerprints. And that always stuck in my mind after graduating from high school, that we need safer places to ride our bikes. While attending grad school at Georgia Tech, it was great not having to need my car. We had MARTA, as well as there was also the shuttle bus. I think most colleges provide that, but even going to public school from private school at Hillsborough, being able to ride a bus, and I was very studious. I'd use those 30 minutes to knock off a calculus problem or whatever. And so it does save time when it comes to just your day. But traveling as well, I travel a lot, mostly for vacation, and going to other cities recently, San Francisco a year or two ago, and New York City and so forth. Just seeing the opportunities that other places have, DC, the Metro, and I've always wished that we could have something similar. And accordingly, I've always wanted more dedicated bike lanes, sidewalks, and subway systems to connect Nashville, much of which has improved significantly since back in the day, since childhood, but a lot needs to continue improving on. I would love to see all parts of Nashville more connected and accessible via mass transit and sidewalks. Aside for convenience, it will also allow more economic opportunities, as everyone knows, but engaging with the refugee community, especially my role at the Islamic Center of Nashville for the last 3 decades almost. Anytime you have that access, even if it's a simple car, but any access to transportation, it's day and night for the refugee community and the community and as a whole. Access towards important services, whether it's healthcare, education, food access. We have food deserts still around, access to events and recreation. It provides all of that. And I think when we talk about youth, it's an opportunity for youth to be more connected, and very importantly for Nashville to be connected so we get to know each other and build a stronger community. And that's my story.
Hey everyone, my name is Joseph Gutierrez. I moved to Nashville 10 years ago following my wife, who grew up in Murfreesboro. And I grew up in Southern California, where I grew up skating everywhere, riding my bike and taking the bus. And so a few days before I moved, I wasn't sure about how I'd get around. I told my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, I think I'm just gonna ride a bike. And then she stopped and was like, "You're an idiot. You can't get anywhere." And then, so after I got here, after 2 weeks, I ended up buying a car. I spent my last $3,000 on a '98 Toyota Corolla which I drove into the ground, which was really difficult, but like, I just was so surprised that I just couldn't get anywhere. Living in Antioch and then having to come into an office in Metro Center, just how difficult that would have been, just taking the bus. One of my roles is that I'm the executive director of API Tennessee, an Asian and Pacific Islander serving nonprofit. And one of the things that my community continues to face is the difficulty of navigating systems. And transit is one of them. So I strongly believe in like language access and making it easier for all communities to ride the bus, ride it safely, figure out information about how to get to where they want to go. Because, you know, we move the city, and I think the city should be capable of moving us.
Did hit it. Hit the wrong one. There we go. My name is Gary Moore, and first of all, Madam Chair, I want to thank you for starting on that side of the room, because that tells me that Mr. Searcy and Mr. Harris, although they may be close to my age, I am the oldest living Nashvilleian on this committee, and probably in this room. I grew up in West Nashville, and for the record, not Belle Meade, not Belle Meade, but on Vernon Avenue, which is right off Robertson Road. The only means of transportation we had was the bus. And this was pre-MTA and pre-WeGo. It was simply called the city bus. And that was our means and only means of transportation that we had. And I enjoyed taking the bus to go downtown to the movies. Most of you probably don't remember the movies that we used to have downtown, the Paramount, the Tennessean. They were great places to go. But anyway, I moved here from McMinnville, Tennessee. My parents did before I was even 2 years old. So I grew up here in Nashville. But more importantly, I'm also a retired Metro firefighter where I spent 32 years serving the citizens of Nashville and very unfortunately attended to many civilian wrecks of all kinds, motorcycles, bicycles, cars, tractor trailers, you name it. And unfortunately, there were many fatalities on those wrecks that we made. And I remember riding my bike with my friends, and it was strictly through the neighborhood. You were safe. You drive right up and down the road. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Nashville has grown. And it has grown to the point that you can no longer do the same thing that I used to do in the very neighborhood that I used to live in. It has changed. And so has Nashville changed. And I'm glad to see that we as a committee have the opportunity to address the issue. And more importantly, I'm glad the mayor took the opportunity to address it, and the citizens of Nashville voted to do it. So we all need to keep that in mind. There's some negative out there. Trust me, I live in a neighborhood where there's a lot of anti-transit people. But the truth of the matter is that the majority of the citizens of Davidson County voted for it, and it's our obligation to try to do our best to implement it in the best means possible. And I look forward to doing that. Thank you.
Good morning. I think it's still morning. Yeah. I'm Zach Young, and as the vice mayor alluded to, in a past life, I served on the council with herself and then Councilmember O'Connell. I now find myself with the pleasure of serving on the school board, where coincidentally, I suppose we are one of the largest transit agencies in the state twice a day as we transport our children to and from school. My transportation story, I suppose, one could say it began when my mother was still pregnant with me, as she worked for the state of Tennessee and every day rode the express bus from Rivergate at the park and ride next to Target and then Castronauts down to the Tennessee Tower. And coincidentally, 18 to 20 years after that, while at Belmont, I would ride that same park and ride to get to Belmont, because though I think it has improved now, they struggled with parking for a very long time, and it was such a great way to have that access to downtown and to school by just driving over to Target and Rivergate Mall and catching the bus. And I'm just very excited to be here and to hopefully bridge the gap with MNPS as well, as I think there's a lot of coordination that we can work on. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for sharing your stories. It really helps to unlock so much of what you're bringing to this table. I also want to take a minute just to thank everyone who is on this side of the room for spending part of your day with us. Perhaps we can go around and just, I know you know many of the faces here, but name and sort of role and why you chose to join us today. Steve? I picked up on that, yeah. Thank you. And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Michael so we can really start to dig in.
All right, thank you all. Thank you all for sharing such good stories. And I think in just about everyone's story, there's some kind of connection and crossover between someone else in the room. And so it's really amazing just how transportation brings us together, or we're just working on improving the conditions in the city, just really kind of bring everybody on the same page. Super excited about this. So what I am going to do, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the information because many of you have seen this stuff over and over again over the years. It may be new, though, to some of you as well. So we wanted to make sure everyone's starting from the same page And I'm just going to get into how we got here with Choose How You Move. And then Kendra will get into in a little bit some of the first steps. And so I think that's what's really exciting about this. So we started this, there's actually decades of work, but we'll start off with Mayor O'Connell coming in office and really running on improving transportation and transit needs in the city. And so after he was sworn in, there were 3 transition committees that met around how Nashville moves, how Nashville grows, and how Nashville, I always forget the last one, works. Sorry. I know. I was like, I always forget this last one. And it happened just now. So I need all of them up there to help me remind me. So this is the overview from how Nashville moves, and it set the stage for us looking at the transit referendum. You'll see that there was a question mark. And what we were balancing at the time was a really urgent timeline to try and hit the fall ballot. And so we started work very quickly, looking at past plans, looking at how the city was growing, and began really making a case for building upon a lot of the work that many people in this room have been a part of over the years. So when you look at Nashville and Middle Tennessee, we continue to grow. This isn't new information to many of us in this room, but this just puts it in comparison. And so some of this information was what was shared with the Technical Advisory Committee and the Community Advisory Committee early last year. And so we haven't changed a lot of this, but you'll have these slides and we'll be able to look at it later as well and study up on this. Then when you look at the city itself, our projections as well were continued to grow. So getting close to 800,000 people projected by the year 2040, just within Davidson County. You've seen this probably several times, several different iterations of this. We call it the heart attack map because it looks like literally our main arteries as part of our transportation system clogging. And so when you look at current congestion and then forecasting to the year 2045, you can see it's not good news as we continue to grow around people's ability just to get around the region. Jobs continue to increase. So you've heard announcements such as expansions at the airport, work there, Oracle, or a major healthcare hub. And so this just puts more and more pressure for, I think several of you mentioned that Nashville continues to grow and change. And then housing costs have been something that have rose as well. And so this is information from the planning department's housing dashboard for last year. And so when you look at those 2 biggest expenses, those are really what is squeezing a lot of Nashvillians right now is being able to get around, so paying for a car, everything that involves maintenance, insurance, gasoline, and then usually monthly rent or a mortgage. So building upon kind of those current trends, we looked back at the past work, and there was Nashville Next done, completed in 2015. It was about a 3-year process that laid out the vision for Davidson County and how we will grow, and really tying how we change the use of our land and tying that to transportation. A series of plans were updated based on Nashville Next to get them in line. So you had the Major and Collector Street Plan. WeGo did the In Motion Transit Plan. There was the Plan to Play by Parks, and then the Walk and Bike Plan by Public Works at the time. And those have since been updated again, and then a Vision Zero Action Plan as well added by NDOT. So we went back to those plans. And it really comes down to the vision is focusing growth in centers and corridors. And so you've seen versions of this before. And so these corridors are where we're able to generate more housing, more jobs. The market has responded to that, and we see that today when you go on many of our pikes. the transformation from kind of the low level, meaning not very tall. There were like gas stations, convenience stores that have become multi-use buildings that are several stories tall. And that produces and introduces a whole new challenge of how people get around and how our infrastructure on those streets keep up. So we looked at all those past plans. There were over 70 of them done since Nashville Next. A lot of them saying some of the same things over and over. So we've never had we've always had an appetite to do planning. Where we have really struggled is to do implementation. And a lot of that has come down to financial resources. And so that's why the vote last year was so significant, because it really invests in producing the infrastructure that is identified in a lot of these plans. So we went out last year with the Choose How You Move program. I'm going to quickly go through what was in it. So this is what was presented at a lot of the community meetings. And it led up to the election on November 5th, where voters decided to implement the program. So what you saw on the ballot was a description of the program. The ballot and program had to go to Metro Council to be put on for a vote. And so voters were then asked at the very bottom of that to either vote for or against it. And so if they were selecting for, they were choosing to implement the Choose How You Move program. And if they selected against, they were saying not to implement the program. And it's being funded through a 50-cent sales tax surcharge. So with Choose How You Move, the program is implementing over 86 miles of sidewalks on many of our main pikes. And it allows us to complete our entire priority sidewalk network that NDOT has identified in the walk and bike plan. To put that in perspective, NDOT in 2023 constructed 6.5 miles of sidewalk last year. This is a slide that oftentimes gets, oh man, it is gonna play. I thought it might not play. So if you remember being a kid, logging in to AOL, in my case, my sister would always pick up the phone and knock you off the internet. So it's very frustrating. But we're using a lot of antiquated technology in Nashville. And so this was to get people thinking about how we've really changed in technology, but a lot of our infrastructure has not kept up to pace. And so this is really our best opportunity to modernize our traffic signals. And so with Choose How You Move, we'll be updating nearly 600 signalized intersections across the county. And it's being connected to a new traffic management center that is actually in this building upstairs. And so maybe one of the things we do one day is do a tour as well and show some of the latest technology that's NDOT is managing with traffic around the city. Also with Choose How You Move, we'll have 24/7, 365 service for the first time in Nashville history. So our buses do not operate past 1 a.m. throughout the city. And it's also an opportunity for us to double our frequent transit network. So we'll be upgrading 54 miles of corridors to all access corridors. So that's where we're doing everything. We are upgrading traffic signals through there, increasing the frequency of transit to every 15 minutes or better. We're improving safety with improved crossings. And then also making sure our sidewalks are complete on those main corridors, so it's all working as a comprehensive street. 12 transit centers are included in the program that allows us to get from neighborhood to neighborhood without having to go into downtown and back out, so that'll increase travel time. And then there's 17 park and rides as well, so that if you are not connected by a sidewalk in your neighborhood, you can drive to a park and ride lot and get onto the WeGo system. And then the fourth component is safety. Many of you shared stories in your introductions of issues around safety. And so that's the heart of the Choose How You Move program. And as part of that, we're upgrading bus stops, nearly 300 of them. There's 35 intersections that are redesigned, many of them on the high injury network. and 35 miles of bikeways that are part of the Complete Streets. So Mayor O'Connell proposed this program, really trying to convey that the safety and the infrastructure on the left is what Nashvillians deserve, and what many Nashvillians are dealing with is infrastructure on the right. And so this gives you an example both within the Madison area of the Madison Station Boulevard, which is a green and complete street, and then Old Hickory Boulevard, which is identified as a future complete street project in Choose How You Move. And so as I mentioned earlier, Nashvillians have told us over and over they want this program. It's identified in many plans, over 70 of them, and out of those 70 plans, there's at least 66,000 pieces of input. And so at the end of the day, that's how we begin to drive down the cost of living for most Nashvillians when transportation and housing make up your two biggest components day to day. And so that's why this matters. This kind of perfect storm is brewing in this city, particularly when you look at housing and how that has changed post-pandemic. Just being able to own a home, being able to rent is something that is really burdening a lot of people in the city. Traffic congestion is getting worse. And so continuing to go down the path of delaying implementation, delaying the things that were identified in many of these plans is just really no longer the solution. And so we're fortunate enough that voters voted to implement this plan. So in talking about the half penny, this is how the tax rate changed on February 1st of this year. So when you spend $50, you're paying an additional 25 cents. So when you go to Walmart and Target, that's an additional 25 cents for every $50 you spend. That ends up being about $6 per month for most households in Nashville. We talked about this, that it really aligns with surrounding counties and their sales tax rate. So we had not increased our sales tax rate to the state maximum. So you're paying this half penny already when you go to Murfreesboro or Mount Juliet to shop. And then we also estimate about 60% of the sales tax being paid by visitors. So that's bachelorettes coming in to town, buying a beer, buying a souvenir t-shirt. They're going to contribute to the program. And then workers that commute in from Hendersonville, Clarksville, buy lunch in Nashville, they're going to help also pay for the program. So we'll get into the implementation a little bit more later, but just keep in mind we've got a 15-year time frame horizon, and that's very ambitious, and so it's something that's going to take a lot of coordination across our departments to deliver. And so you're starting to see some things already underway with the 11 projects that were announced. You can continue to still find information on Choose How You Move, so it's at nashville.gov/transit. We're going to continue to keep that updated. So when we talked about the presentation, this went to nearly 400 different events, meetings. Some portion of this was shared with the community. And so we had close to 10,000 touch points last year just on Choose How You Move alone. We also engaged the council very early in the program and had meetings with at least 38 of them, sometimes multiple times, so that they could understand the program. And so that's why, as the mayor mentioned earlier, your role in this and talking about it with the community is really important as these projects get underway. This is just a recap of the vote. So it was approved by voters by 2/3 voting for it. Almost sort of flips what happened in 2018. And so this also gives you a snapshot of the council district results. So it passed in every council district when you look at it from that perspective. And then we also have the results by voting precinct as well. And so it's not in every voting precinct passed, but you see green mostly on the map. So that sort of recaptures where we are to date. Several of you mentioned things that happened in the last couple of decades. We had the AMP Bus Rapid Transit Project, the Let's Move Nashville referendum that really helped us get to this point. There were a lot of people, passionate people involved in creating those programs, building upon a lot of the good plans from those previous years. And so Mayor O'Connell took office in September, and it seems like it's a very quick timeline, but we know there's a lot of people who've been working on this over a couple of decades to get to a permanent revenue source. Are there any questions you all have on some of the history of Choose How You Move?
The precinct vote, will it show the numbers in each precinct once we get this information?
Yes, we can get you that. Yeah. Other questions?
I do have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want a question.
That's okay. Turn your microphone on if you don't mind. Thank you.
During this process, I've watched the program, the presentation, but and I realize this would take coordination with the federal government. But during this process, can we look at the interstate system as well? Because we have such a problem, especially in the inner city, where people are exiting off the interstate, where people are trying to get on the interstate, so they're making an X trying to cross one another. That causes a lot of wrecks and a lot of traffic congestion. Can we broaden our perspective to look at that, or is that outside the perimeter of what we'll be looking at?
So certainly if there are projects in the program that cross some of the interstate highways, which there are, so many of the all-access corridors cross the interstate highways. And TDOT is a major partner and stakeholder in making sure we deliver this program. So I think with Derek also leading up some of the conversation, there'll be a lot to discuss about the design, where we have an all-access corridor or nearby intersection that is close to the interstate system. Yes?
Yeah, how does MPO or Metropolitan Planning, or I guess organization, is it? How does that tie into what's happening now, what you're doing?
Yes, so very good question. So the MPO is the designated transportation planning agency for the region. So not just Davidson County, but the surrounding counties. And so in Nashville, that's the Greater Nashville Regional Council. All of the federal funding that is within the MPO region goes through GNRC, and it's identified in their TIP, so in the Regional Transportation Improvement Program. We also looked back to the GNRC Middle Tennessee Connected, the regional transportation plan, to make sure things were in line. So they're a significant stakeholder in ensuring that the federal money is expended. Yes, Vice Mayor.
And Rashad, in my capacity as Vice Mayor, I serve on the Transportation Policy Board of the GNRC. The mayor attends as well, and then we'll often have, Mr. Bland or Ms. Alarcone is present. So from a coordination standpoint, and all kinds of background coordination, obviously. So just wanted to share that there's some cross-representation there.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. All right, we'll transition now into what is being done with implementation, and Kendra will start going through that.
All right, so I get to tell you a little bit more about how we've been spending our time post-referendum. And there will be a quiz on everything that was included in the Choose How You Move plan now that you all are experts after we conclude today. So I just want to really reiterate the magnitude of this, not only from a political perspective, but also from a capital programs perspective. We have never delivered on anything of this scale. It's really unprecedented in terms of, again, the magnitude, the quantity of projects, but then the complexity of these projects. And so we really realized this from day one working through the referendum, but it became very real immediately after the election, and we realized, okay, we've got to figure out how to execute on this really bold and ambitious plan that is going to transform our region. So just to give you a little bit better idea, again, of how important this is for our region, it's over $3.1 billion in capital projects across the county, and about $111 million in operating expenditures. Mayor O'Connell alluded to this earlier, but collaboration across multiple different metro departments is really essential to making this happen, and particularly within this ambitious 15-year program timeline. And so we've been spending a lot of time in these early months, really these first 8-9 months of implementation, trying to build some infrastructure and governance that's going to make sense and allow us to move faster in the future together as one sort of metro voice as opposed to delivering projects in silos. And let me be clear, there are instances where it is perfectly appropriate to deliver in silos. A great example of where we're delivering these projects today would be our sidewalk program. That's delivered today. It's led by NDOT in partnership with a variety of different metro departments, but we're really looking at an amplification here. Michael shared information about our all-access corridors. Those are projects that are happening at a scale that's a little different than what we've done in the past. And so that's an example of where we know we really need to build some additional infrastructure and collaboration between our different departments. So what you see here is just kind of a high-level summary of how we have been spending that time. And so really from day one, immediately following the successful referendum, the mayor signaled that we were going to take immediate action. And so 3 things were really announced. One was that we have an intention to partner with the private sector and partners to deliver this program. One was a commitment to posting a job for a chief program officer to receive, to really lead this work. And then an intention to move forward with reconvening an advisory group, and that has turned into this group here, recognizing how instrumental and important that was for the success of the referendum. And so those were 3 immediate actions that literally the day after the successful referendum vote, the mayor signaled he was going to moving forward with. So then December brought actually hosting of some supplier info sessions. So as I mentioned, in addition to building some collaborative structure across our departments, recognizing that we need to start building the foundation for partnerships with the private sector is really important as well. And so beginning to speak externally about what we envision those partnerships to look like is a huge step that we took in December. And then we actually did post the Chief Program Officer role in December as well, and are so grateful to have Sabrina Sussman with us here today. In January, we actually did create the Advisory Committee on Transportation via executive order, and so that was an exciting milestone in that we were able to deliver on that promise with the public. As you all know, there were a variety of different items associated with the plan that were litigated. And so we saw our first legal victory in January in that Choose How You Move was updated as valid and legal by the Chancery Court. And so that was a really critical affirming moment for us that this work could move forward despite having already received approval from the public. As Michael mentioned before, in February, we really saw those half-penny sales tax surcharges begin and that collection to begin. I want to note that we didn't actually receive those surcharges until April, but that was when we started essentially generating dollars for implementation of those projects. In March, we were able to pass a $59 million supplemental budget for those 11 initial projects that the mayor referenced. The reason why we needed a supplemental budget was at the time when Metro Council approved our operating budget for FY25, we actually didn't know whether or not the referendum was going to be successful. And so we needed to receive council's authorization if we wanted to spend any of those revenues that would come in fiscal year 2025. And so that's what was included in that budget. But as mentioned before, it also allowed us to really propel forward some initial projects, and we can talk more about those projects that were funded here in a moment. We then announced the hiring of Ms. Sussman in April, and you all were all appointed into your roles. So either by council nomination and election or as a mayoral appointee. And again, we're so grateful to have each of you here today. And that's why it was really important that shortly after appointing this advisory committee, we wanted to come back and bring you all together to formally kick off your time as a committee. So we didn't get to stop right after passing that supplemental budget. And in large part, some of our milestones to date have really been dictated by financial timelines and fiscal timelines. And that's why Amanda Dietz-Moyer from our finance team has been so helpful in helping us navigate how to make sure we can access those funds. So as I mentioned before, this is a program that has a lot of capital projects. It also has operating expenditures. And so in order to be able to pull down dollars to support operational activities in fiscal year 26, we needed to come right back around with our first operational budget for Choose How You Move work. And so council is actually in the process of considering those budgets, but we looped Choose How You Move in with overall Metro Department operational spending, and we've proposed $164 million for Choose How You Move that's included in the FY26 budget. We also convened our first project-specific advisory committee, and that's a committee that is focused on Jefferson Street. And so what we're seeing here is not only are you all our programmatic and program-level advisory group, but as we indicated during the referendum education process, we also know that there will be a variety of opportunities for the public and community members to engage in project-specific activities. And so brought that group together to think about how we're planning the future of the Jefferson Street corridor and Complete Streets project. And then in May, we were also excited to officially announce that Michael Briggs is coming back in our Deputy Chief Program Officer role. So that brings us to today, the first meeting of this group, and we're so excited to get regular touch points with you all moving forward. The mayor and CEO Bland have announced some of the service enhancements that will be going into implementation next month, but those will actually hit the streets in July. And then, as mentioned before, we're targeting a late fall announcement for our low-income fare ticket program. So those are some important milestones. Again, there's a lot of work underway, and some of our department representatives and Sabrina will be able to speak to that here in a moment. I want to share a little bit more information with you about how we envision program oversight and delivery, because it has been a little bit of a point of confusion. And so the way we envision this, the way we actually earned the trust of the community was by speaking with one voice and approaching the public and sharing information about this ambitious and bold program, Choose How You Move, that's going to transform our community. And so in order, given the complexity, the multi-departmental nature, the fact that projects are going to be implemented by WEGO, NDOT, ITS, our planning department is significantly involved, and numerous other players, metro departments that aren't represented today, it's really important to us that we keep some centralized oversight and almost an air traffic controller role as we think about delivery. And so we envision essentially a tiered structure. So there will be overall program management that's working again to make sure that everyone's aligned and moving in the same direction. And that oversight will really come out of the mayor's office through a team that's led by Sabrina and Michael. Again, alignment is sort of the big key here. And then when we have instances where there may be confusion or there's need for additional clarity about roles and responsibilities, that's when that program management entity would come in and help make those kinds of decisions in consultation with the mayor and metro departments. I also think it's really important to have that centralized program management perspective when we think about transparency and accountability with the public. And so that way there's a one-stop shop for really communicating that information and program progress out to the rest of the community and the public. The second area where we will really see our departments become essential partners is with project implementation and program delivery. And so that's where a lot of our resources and capacity to actually execute are located. That's where it's located today. And they'll really be getting some additional resources both through the supplemental budget as well as the FY26 budget to build up that capacity. I also want to note that we see vendor partners as really important throughout this. So to support our overall program management on a short-term basis, we've been partnering with HDR out of the mayor's office. And again, we've been bringing in the departments to do this work with us as well. Over the long term, we will be partnering with a firm known as HNTB and are beginning contract negotiations with them in the coming weeks. And so significant vendor partnership there. We can also talk a lot about vendor partnerships to support project implementation as well. So NDOT is in the midst of negotiating an IDIQ, which essentially will allow us to utilize on-call contracts to support much of their work, Choose How You Move and otherwise. WeGo has also been moving through a similar process, or will be moving through a similar process, both for capital projects management, but also implementation and sort of design and engineering services for one of our all-access corridors. So that's also why this overall program management structure is really important to sort of help all the moving pieces moving in the same direction. I wanted to quickly touch again on how we're thinking about partnership with vendors. This is a really important conversation and topic, especially as we move through this transitional period from scaling up operations. And so we know that we will need to enhance and really augment both internal and external resources to get this project done. We also know that we'll have to leverage some of our existing and traditional delivery methods, but also think about new ways to deliver, again, given just the volume and magnitude of this work. And so one of the questions we've frequently encountered as we've done this ramp up work is what's being done out of house versus what's being done in-house. And we don't always have a clear answer for that. That's something that's going to evolve. But we have tried to be very, very thoughtful, both within the mayor's office, but also in our delivery departments, and thinking about the best way to really ramp up this work. Because again, we want to be able to deliver in a quick fashion to the public, but we also want to think long-term about delivery of this program and what makes sense. And so what you'll see on this slide here is some of the factors that we're trying to consider as we make the decision. Does it make sense to build resources in-house to do something, or is this something that's better suited for a vendor partner to help us execute? So some of the things are, how long are we going to need the service? Is it a good fit with departmental responsibilities? Does that knowledge base exist today, or is that something that we need to actually invite in from the private sector? And then when we need those resources. And what I can tell you is that there is a commitment on behalf of the mayor's office as well as departments to build capacity and long-term knowledge and expertise in our departments, but we really also need to balance that with ability to execute quickly. And so I think this is a huge opportunity, in addition to transforming the way we move around the city, to actually really build up our workforce as well and the knowledge and expertise that we have in our departments. And so that's really exciting to be able to bring those things together. I mentioned before that we've been doing some initial supplier outreach, and this is again an area where having one unified voice has been hugely important. We've already engaged in several supplier outreach events, and at each of those events there's been a representative of the mayor's office, of Metro Procurement, of NDOT, and then of WeGo. And so why this matters, some of you may not be aware of this. WeGo actually has separate procurement authority that's different from Metro General Government, whereas the mayor's office and NDOT both are going through Metro General Procurement, General Government Procurement. And so having all of those entities present, sharing information with potential partners is really important. We are trying to take an approach that touches many different geographic areas of the city and many different neighborhoods. And so you can see that we have 2 more left. We've been a lot of places this spring, 2 more left, one in the East Corridor and one in the Donaldson area. With each of these, not only has it been an overview of the program, where we anticipate the need to partner, also any current RFPs or opportunities that are available, but they also have a significant networking component. And that becomes really important not only for our larger vendor partners, but also our small businesses that are really looking to engage. And that is important to us, is figuring out how we can really drive economic opportunity for our small and local businesses here. So we will share information with you all about the timing for the June and July events so that you can also share that with your networks. And just a little bit more information about the advisory committee. I don't want to dwell on this because I know we have time later. in our agenda to talk about the roles and responsibilities of the advisory committee, but you'll see all of your names here. We're pleased that all of you but 2 members are here today. We are recording, as you all know, and so we'll be able to share notes and a debrief with the two members that weren't able to join us today. Again, more about your roles and responsibilities soon. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina to kick off our portion where we'll do a deeper dive into work that's in progress.
Thank you, Kendra. How's everyone doing? Okay, excellent. I'm going to do a very, very light touch here on the 26 budget. I think Kendra has done an excellent job laying out a little bit of our philosophy here. I think, you know, budgets are policy, and budgets tell you what priorities are, and people are policy. And so really what I sort of want to spend a couple minutes talking about is about the foundation that the fiscal year 26 budget is really trying to set. And so you can go through and read through some of the specific investments that are detailed here in the bullet points. But I think if you pull up a little bit more, it's about really building the foundation that Kendra outlined, insofar as we are doing a thing that is enormous for the first time and finding our footings across all of Metro. And so the goal here is really, how do we build a foundation for the institution that's going to move the operational and infrastructure activities forward that we've already outlined? People want to see that you are building the facility that will then be able to implement things. For me, this actually comes down to really talent. Because talent is a lot of what's going to be able to drive our commitments year over year, whether they be operational or infrastructure in nature. This is both an internal talent building exercise and about our workforce here at Metro, and of course, as Kendra mentioned, about the series of vendors that come in to supplement that. But a thing that's super important to me that I've spent a lot of time thinking about is how do we really start to build up that network? And you've already seen either folks moving into new roles like Derek, or folks who have come back like Michael, or net new folks like me. And so I want you to think about sort of the network effect that happens when you start spending Metro's money on building out the institution. You'll see in front of you, obviously, there are immediate operational and infrastructure changes and service changes that we are making, and the top 11 projects that have already been released are all in flight. But those things don't happen on their own. And so a lot of the work that this team is going to be doing is, how does that budget actually reflect where we want to build the strength as we move forward for the next 14 years to come? And so that's sort of the philosophy, I think, that drives a lot of the initial budgeting. Any questions on that? Yes.
Thank you, Sabrina. For the 3 WeGo link zones, I know those are 3 additional WeGo link zones. So how many total will that bring us to? Or there potentially is a recalibration of that, but.
When you include the 2 we implemented over the weekend, plus those 3, it'll take us to 21.
Awesome. Okay, great. Thank you.
Just for folks who are listening to the recording or live stream, that's a total of 21.
Yeah, I just want to commend you for this focus on capacity building. I think when you look around the world at cities that are implementing a lot of transit projects, they can do that a lot more quickly because they don't have to go through these long contracting processes and all the complexity that comes with that. So I think it might be a little painful at the start, but I think if we look at this 10, 20-year time horizon, it's a great investment that's going to put us on the footing for projects even beyond Choose How You Move.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, I want to reflect on the fact that we are anticipating about $1.5 billion in federal grants over the 15-year period. What is our capacity to supplement that budget when the Fed, if and when the Fed decides that it's going to bail on us? And subsequently, I want to, since in January, there was a Chancery Court victory, but the appeals court modified that victory such that we no longer can take transit money and put it in the affordable housing bin that we originally had anticipated we would be able to do. So those two questions.
Maybe I will jump in first on the federal question, which is an excellent one that, as you might imagine, I've spent a lot of time thinking about, given my last role was at USDOT. Look, I think one thing that's important to walk away with is, thanks to Amanda, we've done this math. In the first 5 years, it's only 6% that is federal funds. And so the first thing we need to do is sort of take a deep breath and remember that that $1 billion, this is a long haul. And so that there is no reason now to sort of make assumptions that that pie chart is going to look differently. What will look differently is what happens the next 4 years. And so we need to be sort of thoughtful about where we spend our time. And Debbie and I were just joking that, like, this is the moment where you sit and you plan and you get your ducks and you put them in a row, and then you are then ready. And that work is in some ways even harder, because you're trying to plot out anticipatory, what's going to happen, is it going to be 4 years, will it be 8? But you are not wrong that the federal government has chosen at the moment to abdicate their responsibility. You will hear me say that over and over. That is not a permanent fixture. That is a moment in time. And so our responsibility is to continue to build the system such that when we make that case once again to those who are invested in helping us build our future, the case is stronger. And so that will continue to be a part of how we think about phasing projects, how we think about phasing what money we're spending where. But the onus really becomes, how do you best prepare for the next chapter, acknowledging all the things that are happening today. I think on your question sort of about color of money as it relates to housing versus transportation, I'm happy to let anyone else sort of take a bite here. But, I think, again, it's the same idea, which is it's not about how do we sort of lose this particular resource, but how do we position in time spending out of the right categories to make sure we're fulfilling the full vision. But I don't know, Michael or Kendra, if you had another thought.
Yeah, really, what the state court of appeals did was just reaffirm that we can't use the revenue for housing, and that assumption is baked into the program. So they clarified that. I don't think it impacts things tremendously in terms of a budget standpoint.
And I'll also just share that there are still really great opportunities to partner with the private sector to deliver very innovative multi-use projects that can have affordable housing, even if we are unable to spend Choose How You Move dollars on affordable housing, if that makes sense. And I think that's part of figuring out what our overall strategy is for deploying these resources in a way that best leverages non-chime resources in a very strategic way.
Okay, with that, I'll hand it over to Steve.
There, that work? Perfect. Thank you. Exactly. So my focus is on our planned transit service expansion. I think after that, Amanda's going to cover the low-income program. Appropriately, we spent a lot of attention focusing on the stuff associated with Choose How You Move, the projects, the capital investments. But I think more than anything else, this is a service investment. And you saw Michael mention earlier, out of the overall program plan, in 2024 dollars, the Choose How You Move program identified $111 million in annual recurring operating funds to be applied towards service expansion for our system. And just as a point of reference, our current annual operating budget is about $128 million. So that translates over time to about an 80% expansion in service. So I'll spend a little bit of time up front talking about the overall framework of service expansion and then kind of segue into some of the shorter term things you'll expect to see. So from a financial, from a logistical perspective, if we were to add 80% to our service overnight, people like David would probably have a heart attack. And whoever your next CEO is would really be dealing with some issues. So realistically, we're programming this out, and the way that it was programmed in the financial plan was us able to add it incrementally over about 12 years at the rate of about 6 or 7% in service hours per year. That is both in the purple here on what we call our fixed route side, which is the city bus type system, as well as our access, the WeGo Access program, door-to-door service for persons with different abilities. And also WeGo Link that Vice Mayor Henderson had alluded to earlier. You saw this slide earlier in Michael's presentation, some of the highlights of service delivery, moving to 24-hour-a-day service on some of our key corridors, advancing more of what we call our frequent service network, which I'll touch on in a minute. As I mentioned, 80% increase in service overall. New crosstowns, extensions of service, new express routes. I heard the Rivergate Express, the late great Rivergate Express mentioned earlier. I wouldn't get too hung up on the details. So Michael alluded to the speed with which we had to move to get this on the general election calendar. So what was done in developing the service model was really to layer on to our existing system. Over time, you'll see us have the capacity to restructure, quite a bit of service. And we currently have Kimley Horn and Nelson Nygaard on board to update. Jennifer, you'll remember the N-Motion plan back in the day, three jobs ago, somewhere in there, where we developed the overall system plan. So that will allow us to take the framework of Choose How You Move, that financial envelope, the general description of projects and services described in Choose How You Move, to optimize and make that network a bit more efficient and a bit more usable. And a good example of what I'm talking about, if you can kind of visualize it around the city, last year when we opened the Dr. Ernest Rip Patton Jr. North Nashville Transit Center, we restructured all of the services in North Nashville. So we upgraded, we short-turned the main route there, the 22 Bordeaux, and improved frequency. We put on route extensions to serve, say, the Metro Center route and the Whites Creek bus to extend there. We did reroutings of the 4 routes that had already served that location. So we completely restructured a service to take advantage of that facility, and as a result of the improvements in frequency, efficiency, reliability, connectivity, over the first year, we saw about a 36% increase in ridership on the 7 routes that serve that particular center. So I think as you see us build out similar facilities in places like Antioch, Donaldson, Bellevue, we'd like to look towards similar service redesign. All of that is sort of built on this backbone of our frequent network routes that I think probably almost everybody in this room could probably name. Right now, those are services that run every 15 minutes or better for the better part of the service day. They kick off at about 4:30 in the morning, run till 1:15 in the morning. They operate 7 days a week. They are the 3 West End, the 7 Hillsborough, the 22 Bordeaux, the 23 Dickerson Pike, 50 Charlotte Pike, 52 Nolensville Pike, 55 Murfreesboro Pike, and the 56 Gallatin Pike. Ultimately, as Choose How You Move is built out, those 8 routes will increase to 14 routes added to that network, and all the routes in that network will be operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Some, at least half, all of them with at least 15-minute core frequency, and quite a few of them with 10-minute or better core frequency. The additional routes that are slated to be added over time include parts of the 4 Shelby, the 6 Lebanon Pike, 8 8th Avenue South, 19 Herman, 29 Jefferson Street, and the 75 Midtown, which is a crosstown route. Most of our other local routes will also see improvements in frequency and/or span. We'll be developing, as this earlier slide indicated, additional crosstowns, additional local circulators in neighborhoods. Access will continue to expand in terms of the size of our fleet, the number of operators, opening up more trip opportunities for folks. We'll continue to expand the partnerships we have with the private sector. We currently work with 4 carriers on services like Access Flex, and Access on Demand. So we want to provide our access users with more user choice options so that they can pick the piece of service that works best for them. When it comes down to how this all gets deployed, it has to be done, sounds pretty simple, right? Just add a whole bunch more service and tell people where it is. But logistically, it gets fairly complicated, and we're looking at sequencing in a way that takes account for all of the things that need to be in place first for something to be effective. First, and pretty obvious, is operational staff. Over the 12-year build-out of service, WeGo currently has about 850 employees. We project needing another 700. So we'll be over 1,500 in employment by the time this is all built out. Obviously, most of those in our operational area: bus operators, technicians, operations supervisors, the people who clean buses, the people who clean our facilities, and obviously the security staffing associated with that. So that's been a core area of focus for us. Fleet and equipment, overall, to deliver the full plan, we have a current fleet of about 260 buses. That will go to 360, as well as additional support equipment. So for instance, as we're adding more sheltered stops, the trucks and the service equipment to service those stops, to empty the trash, what have you, will need to be added. Passenger facilities were a significant area of focus in the Choose How You Move plan. 12 additional transit centers that Michael alluded to, park and ride facilities, 285 stop and shelter upgrades that we work very collaboratively with NDOT on, as well as TDOT, and then the all-access corridor improvements. And then finally, and kind of underestimated all this, are our operating facilities. Fleet storage and maintenance we'll be needing to do, and we are doing significant upgrades to our Nestor Street bus operations facility. We'll need to develop a new bus operations facility. Upgrades to our support centers, for instance, our operations control center will need to be expanded and upgraded. Our security control center will need to be upgraded and expanded, as well as support for our administrative expansion to address all of this. With respect to passenger facilities, the transit centers will be key. Currently, the Elizabeth Duff Transit Center at WeGo Central is our primary connection point in the system. Despite the fact that it has 24 bus bays, it is way over capacity in terms of service and usage. On an average weekday, we have 2,200 bus movements in and out of that facility and 17,000 customers who pass through there. And if you go down there about 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon, particularly on a school day, you will see buses backed out onto James Robertson Parkway, just waiting for a place to stop. So key to us being able to expand services, particularly during peak periods, will be the development of the supplemental transit centers, both the neighborhood transit centers as well as the additional 2 downtown hubs, one in the Sobro neighborhood and one eventually on the East Bank. And we talked about the supporting facilities. One of the projects we completed last year, which is going to be super helpful, we basically doubled the size of our operator training lot. We also added some for lack of a better word, amenities there to have them be able to practice things like level platform boarding and some of the specific operating conditions. And thanks, I'll specifically look at Vice Mayor Henderson. Thanks to the supplemental appropriation from council, we've already been able to add more recruiting and training staff to kind of double down on that effort to bring staff on board. So in the meantime, what we'll be focusing on is the shorter term improvements that we can deliver. And this will give you a snapshot over the next year or two. And by the way, this committee is going to play a crucial role internally as we go through the service development plan over the next year, year and a half. This past weekend, we opened up our very popular and growing in demand, our Access on Demand service, that same day door-to-door service on our access system, 2 weekends. So that was available this weekend. We added the Maplewood Broadmoor WeGo Link Zone in East Nashville and the Elm Hill Pike WeGo Link Zone in the Donaldson area. July 6th will be fixed route frequency improvements. We update our schedules twice a year, once in July, once in January. You'll see midday frequency improvements on the 6th, Lebanon Pike, weekday evening frequency improvements on the Murfreesboro Pike and Gallatin Pike buses, and weekend frequency improvements on the Dickerson Pike, Charlotte Pike, Murfreesboro Pike, and Gallatin Pike services. In January, we'll look to basically lengthen our Sunday service day to match the other 6 days. That is 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to 1:15 in the morning on our core routes that you see listed there. There'll be additional midday frequency improvements on the 3 West End and the 18 airport buses, Elm Hill Pike. and weekend frequency improvements on the 23 and the 52. Then in July 26th, we hopefully will be starting to see delivery of our expansion fleet. We put in an initial order of 12 buses a few months ago, and that will allow us to do something I know is near and dear to the mayor's heart, and that is adding an extension of our 55 Murfreesboro Pike bus to serve BNA via the Donaldson Pike. And Debbie Frank and our staff are currently working with the airport to identify the stop locations, both short and long term, because over the long term, eventually, there'll be about 4 or 5 routes that serve the airport. So that's a quick summary of what we're looking at in service. And Sabrina, you want me to go direct to Amanda, or are there any questions, Gary?
Real quick, and I say this because I think this is something we could use, assuming you respond the way I hope you will. What is WEGO's overall safety record?
In terms of accidents?
Yes.
Really excellent within the industry. Most of the accidents we have, we refer to them as mirror taps. So as you'd imagine, they're very tight.
I'm looking to be able to say it's a safe mode of transportation.
Yes, extremely safe.
Okay, so y'all have what I would call minor accidents, but you have very few accidents where people are actually injured?
Yeah, injuries are extremely few and far between. And the context of that is on an average weekday, we have about 30,000 people who ride the system.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm really excited to hear about additional routes that are going to the airport and, of course, the increased frequency from the 55 going to the airport. As you're talking with them, when I try to use the bus going to the airport or coming from the airport, you have to walk past sort of all the car-based modes of operation before you even get to the bus. You're walking past all of the parking garages, of course. You're walking into the parking area. You go past all of the Lyft and Uber sections, the hotel shuttles, before you get to the bus. And I think that really kind of sets people off on the thought that, taking the bus is the last option if you're coming in. And so I certainly encourage trying to push that option more front and center, because I think that'll also help reduce traffic as fewer people need to get on Lyft or Uber and the circulating in the airport that happens when you're trying to get your ride.
Yeah, one of the challenges and the opportunities is Choose How You Move is advancing at the same time as the airport's capital expansion process. So our conversations with them are kind of centered around short, medium, and long term. What can we do immediately in the current setting? What can we do in the next 3 to 5 years as their new transportation center comes online? And then what do we do long term as they even start looking at things like a second terminal?
Okay, great. I'm Amanda Vandergrift with WEGO. I understand we are getting up to the top of the hour on our 2 hours together, so just wanted to acknowledge that, and that this deck will also be sent out to you so we can you can look at it later and provide comments. And also, Rashad, go Jackets. I had to add that. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about the low-income fare ticket program, which Kendra mentioned is one of our top, our top 11 projects that we've been moving forward, and we're also hoping to open this program and fully launch it by the end of this calendar year. So we've coined this program to be named the LIFT program, or LIFT, and we set a goal for the program of what success would look like when we were working together to define it over the past few months. The goal would be to aim to provide free transit service to Davidson County residents who need it the most. And we looked at 4 different design goals when we started talking about what LIFT would look like. One of them is maximizing access for those eligible customers. So that's our number 1 goal. Second goal, simplifying the process for both our customers, but also for the administrators of the program. The third would be minimizing abuse without impacting that legitimate use for the program. So that's a trade-off there when we're designing the program. And finally, how can we generate data and better understand the use of the program over time as we soft launch it over the next few months and then fully launch it at the end of this year. So just to show you where we are today, Kendra had a nice timeline up there of when Chime was approved. We're about halfway through program definition and looking forward to launch in the early fall time period. And we're hoping to fully launch the program a year into the program, so around November of 2025, so by the end of this calendar year. We have held one agency workshop where we focused in on some of the top agencies we think that we'd be working with to register eligible participants and get cards into the hands of folks who need it the most. But we're looking to, and of course we're talking with you today, and we're looking to have two different workshops, one on June 11th and another on June 17th, where we've expanded the pool of participants very broadly to include others that could help us register eligible participants in the LIFT program and folks who could just be partners in the program as well. And we're, currently in the definition phase where we're looking to get feedback from this group on who we're engaging. So just to show you who we have been engaging and who we plan to engage over the next month, LIFT agencies, including We Go Public Transit would be a registering agency, and then we'd also have Metro Social Services, Office of Homeless Services, MDHA, and we have several other Metro departments that we would partner with as well. We're still talking with them right now on what that would look like. And then on the LIFT partner side, we have advocacy agencies like Stand Up Nashville, NOAA, and we also have other partners across the board. And again, looking for any feedback from you guys on if we are missing anyone here, because we have time right now to make sure that we get them an invite and have them attend the next two public meetings that we're holding this month. So feel free to send comments or let us know if you think that we need to add anyone to this partner list. So based on what we heard in our first workshop, we have a draft framework, and this is very much in development based on what we hear from you today and then the next month of engagement. We're looking at free services provided to folks, MTA bus service, WeGo Access, WeGo Link base fare, and then the RTA bus and WeGo Star services. This would be targeted to Davidson County residents. We would be looking to verify eligibility at WeGo online or in person, and then with some of our participating agencies like the Metro Social Services, Office of Homeless Services, MDHA, Metro Action Commission, and more. They could provide income verification, or they could show proof of enrollment in an eligible benefit program. So that's what we're looking at right now, kind of honing what those programs would be and what they would need to provide to show that they are eligible for the LIFT program. Some other items of importance, we'd use our existing quick ticket program. So the existing fare pass that we use today, they'd be able to either take what they have in their wallet right now and make it eligible for free fares, or purchase a new card. The first card would be free. Any replacement would be $5. That's kind of what we talked about loosely in our first meeting. We also would be looking at the transition of the cold weather and connector card programs, and I have a slide on that next to talk a little more about why that's so important to transition into one simple LIFT program, because they have very strong similarities in terms of the design of the LIFT program and what the cold weather and connector program cards do. And finally, to make sure that we hit that third goal in the design of making sure that we limit the potential for fraud, we want to have a verification of renewal every 3 years. We do that on a rolling basis, potentially on birthdays, so that we can get that verification of their eligibility every 3 years and make sure that, we're limiting that potential for abuse. We did do some industry research in partnership with HDR, who Kendra mentioned earlier. They highlighted some key pieces that really kind of align with the framework we just showed you. Many of the industry peers who have a program similar to this have an income-based pre-qualification like we have in the framework right now. They most commonly use the 200% of the 45% FPL, federal poverty level. They also allow pre-qualification for other programs like we're proposing in this. So they're most commonly allowing pre-qualification for SNAP and EBT. We're looking at maybe a broader pre-qualification than that, but that is the most common. And finally, one of the common practices we see is having this online self-serve portal, and we are also working right now with Hub Nashville to set up an initial form, which would be how you would go online and provide the verification. Yes?
Target date of implementation.
great question. Target date of implementation is November of this year. That's when we think we'll have everything out on the street, but we are hoping to do a soft rolling launch on some of the key agencies, including WeGo, where we'd be able to implement sometime August to November. We'd begin standing things up as we're able. But we're hoping to really target November as that, full launch. And finally, just a little more information on the connector cards and the cold weather cards. I know many of you are probably very familiar with those cards and the programs. The connector card provides free passes for those who are chronically unhoused as they transition to permanent housing, so very much in line with the goal that I showed you on the first slide. And then the cold weather cards, we hand out passes that activate when the temperature drops below 40 degrees. So we felt both of those programs, which have, by the way, skyrocketed in use over the past few years, with no accompanying income. As the CFO at WeGo, it's a pretty significant hit on our financial plan. And so having Choose How You Move fund this is also important to have that strong foundation for WeGo as we embark on expansion. So that program really aligns perfectly with Lyft. So we were envisioning transitioning both of those cards into Lyft by November. And then next steps, we're working on stakeholder engagement, of course, today, and then in June with these 2 workshops, make sure that we have everyone at the table that needs to be in June so we can, put forward a program that aligns with all of our goals. We are, like I mentioned, preparing an online form in partnership with Hub Nashville. We should have a draft to review at the June workshops. And then we are also developing some branding and logos for rollout at the end of this year. In partnership with the mayor's office, drafting agreements with those who would be registering along with WeGo, and finally looking at how we can make sure that we put this forward with a strong accounting approach that increases our fare revenue at WeGo. And that's it. If I can take any questions.
Thank you for that. I wanted to ask, what kind of demographic data are you hoping to collect with the Lyft program?
So that is very much open. We haven't even, touched on that in the first meetings, but hopefully in June we can talk a little more about what would be appropriate to collect and how we'd use it and how it could help us shape the program, but still very much up for discussion.
Thank you. And do you currently connect demographic data for the connector card enrollment?
That is a good question.
We don't. It's administered by a homeless division.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Question here.
I think Gracie, and then we'll go.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Gracie, and then we'll go to you. Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay. I was also wondering, I know that you were considering income and members of the unhoused community as being part of the criteria for receiving assistance to be more integrated into your program. Have you considered a perspective of making sure that that is being able to be available for people with physical disabilities and helping that? Is there a potential way to help them become more involved with you guys?
I think that's absolutely up for discussion in our June workshops. I think we have attendance from, looks like the APAC board meetings would be a good.
Yeah, we can make sure to add several representatives to our June meetings.
That's a good point. Okay, so let's add APAC to our June meetings. Okay, great, thank you. And if there's anyone else you think we should add, please let us know. Go ahead.
Real quick, I think the agencies that you listed is in the vetting process. That just kind of opens the door. Y'all would still have, because all those agencies that I've seen, they have different criteria. But the fact that somebody qualifies for one of those agencies just basically opens the door to make it easier for them to start the process. And I would assume y'all would do the vetting, and I think I've seen up there the 200% of the, okay, so again, opening the doors, all those agencies do, and y'all still have your own vetting process.
Well, let me clarify, because the framework right now says or. So if they qualify for one of those programs, we have not confirmed what the programs will be yet, but for one of those.
That was basically my question. So either or, as long as if they qualify for either of those agencies that you recommended, then they qualify for the lift.
That's right, automatically.
Okay.
We would not then go
Okay.
through the administrative burden of qualifying them again.
Thank you.
What is your criteria for partners?
I mean, I think anyone who we think needs to be shaping this. So right now, you can see the kind of list of partners we've identified, but we just updated this yesterday. So this is very much in development. So please feel free to suggest more.
Delegation and Pacific agency.
Yeah, for my own, but like
Yeah.
Project Return should probably be on this list.
Kendra's taking great notes over there. Thank you, Kendra.
I was just going to ask, our conversations underway with MNPS about reaching families that way?
Very good point. So MNPS, we have the STRIDE program, which has been super successful at WeGo. It's one of our major partnerships. We plan to keep that separate. It has a separate funding source, separate kind of focus from the goal that I put up on the first slide. So right now, the intent is to keep it separate. We could envision combining it later, but that's not.
I definitely see a risk of confusion if you have two, but on the other hand, if the STRIDE is just for the students and this program might also support families.
Yes.
Fair.
Students and staff.
We have representatives from the HERO program also coming to our agencies meeting.
But yes, very good point. This potentially would have families with dependents eligible, which may have some overlap with STRIDE. Who wants to go first?
Can you clarify the distinction between agencies and partners on this slide? And so, in the senior space, I'm thinking of 50 Forward or AARP, and I'm not really sure kind of where to situate agencies, which I see more as kind of like active participant partners. But the LIFT partners are actually, like, I think it's maybe slightly counterintuitive as far as how I'm thinking about it.
It's a very good, we actually had a call on Friday talking about how we would define this, because we had 3 buckets at one point. We're like, let's simplify it. It's the whole point of keeping things as simple as we can.
Okay.
The agencies were intended to be those who are really actively registering and verifying, participants and handing cards out. The partners, we have not fully defined, if they would receive cards to hand out and would be doing that, or if they'd be more just advocates or getting information out on the LIFT program and where to go. So that's really, at this point, in the middle of engagement, kind of being defined. And you might see different terms by the end of this.
Okay, I appreciate that. And do you all intend, I presume, maybe to come back over to the council side of the house, whether the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee or Public Health and Safety? I know there's a lot of council interest around this program, and I'm not sure where, if that will have to be this committee's role versus just an awareness of the council. It could be purely informational in committee. I'm not sure if it needs to be formalized by resolution or otherwise, but do you have any thoughts on that, Ms. Abkowitz? Or?
Yeah, it's a great question. One thing we're trying to figure out is cadence of meetings with this group and then cadence of updates to different council committees and council as a whole. To date, we presented an update, just a general overview, Choose How You Move update to Transportation and Infrastructure. I believe it was the end of March. And so probably once we regroup after this meeting and sort of what we discussed and learned, I think in the future what we'd like to see is an advisory committee meeting shortly followed by a council committee update. Now, that being said, if that feels insufficient or if there's other subcommittees or committees that we need to be briefing, let us know. So that's something we can connect on. But we did commit in the EO to provide updates not only to this group, but also to council on a recurring basis.
I appreciate that. I'm happy to confer on that just so you all are not kind of having to over-report and there's
Awesome.
a regular cadence. Thank you.
I had one final question. Have you considered the potential for partnering with local colleges and university campuses, whether that be ones closer to Midtown like Vanderbilt, Belmont, or ones sort of further out like Nashville State? and just using those partnerships to better link the student community and into transportation.
We do have partners through our We Go Ride program. That's where we typically do our outreach with our universities and students. But it's something we haven't really thought about here with the LIFT program as much, but we can, I think, bring that for discussion. Yes, ma'am.
So my question is not for you, Amanda. I know that we're almost at 20 minutes past and we have other things on the agenda. Do we anticipate being here another 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45? I just want to make sure for those of us who may have to negotiate with others on their time. I can sit here, but I just want to know what we should be allocating for.
So I think you're going to table discussion 5, and just discussion number 6 is really just a thank you. So what I'd love to do now is turn it over to Derek and have him quickly cover fiber and documenting. I think that we can probably do that in less than 10 minutes.
Absolutely. I'll give the 2-minute overview here. We'll cover all these projects in the future. Also stick around after for anyone that has specific questions. So just some of the early initiatives we've started. Signal planning. We're tasked with upgrading 592 signals to be smart signals. As part of that, we're looking at 3 initial tasks. Number 1, what is a smart signal? And what's the technology, the hardware, software that makes it up? So working very closely with our consultant community and a lot of our university partners in the area to define what technology we're going to have out there so that we can start ordering materials and deploying in the field. Task number 2 there is prioritizing these intersections. These projects are going to be rolled out on a corridor basis. So understanding where we can see the most benefits early on, which ones are the easiest lifts, which are the most impactful, and working with all the other department teams to understand how this aligns with other projects, other programs, ensuring we're going about this in the most effective manner. And then finally, task 3, and I think I'm actually jumping ahead a slide, is really doing detailed budget estimates for the first few years so that when we give those numbers to Amanda, we're pretty solid with what we're doing. We're getting the funding we need at the time we need it. One thing I do want to really emphasize on the signal piece is when we're talking smart signals here, you'll often hear adaptive being thrown around. And that's a phrase I'm going to avoid because in the traffic industry, adaptive is really seen as moving cars. How are we most effective there? What we're trying to do in Nashville is move people. So that's including understanding how transit fits in. How do we get ridership numbers to our signals so they know how to prioritize? That's detecting pedestrians waiting to cross, bicyclists, capturing all those modes, and then we're able to set parameters around what we want to prioritize by location, by corridor, by time of day, by special event going on. So what we're looking here is really a comprehensive system. Looking forward to having a lot of more conversations around signals with this group and really getting into some of the details. Communication fiber, really speaking on behalf of Metro ITS for this one. They are project managing a lot of these. On the map here, you can see our current fiber network in green. Over the next 5 to 6 years, we're looking to roll out everything on those purple dotted lines and then include cross connections. This is a plan that, frankly, we've had in place since about 2005, and we were probably on pace to get this done in about 120 years. So the funding that's coming with this program is radically shaping our ability to deploy communication fiber, which allows us to push large amounts of data and make real-time decisions within our signal network, which is exactly the backbone that those smart signals need. So the nice thing here, because we have been pushed to get our traffic management center up and running, we've already been starting a lot of this work. Installations going on as we speak on Nolensville right now. Clarksville is almost complete with its fiber connection up to Kings Lane, which is really where our signal density drops off. In Gallatin, we are wrapping up designs to have fiber run all the way to the county border. We'll be starting installation on that next year. So a lot of good progress is taking place already, and we're just supercharging this process with the funding coming in through Choose How You Move. All right, the last one, Gallatin, Maine. This is a project that hopefully a lot of you have heard some about. It's transforming Main Street Gallatin Pike into being a complete street that's safe, reliable, and accessible to all users. We really see this as being a great initial template to what we're looking to roll out on a lot of these all-access corridors. Interstate Drive to Eastland, we're early in design right now, and actually, I think I have it on this slide here, we have a design workshop with the WeGo team later this afternoon to talk through some of those questions that you see on the board here. Because not only are we transforming the roadway here, but also has the ability to shape transit operations. So we're being very deliberate in this planning and design process to ensure that the decisions we're making make sense with the direction WeGo's moving in and informs those really design attributes going in both directions. So quick overview there. Again, I'll take any questions now if we have time, and I'll stick around to answer anything as well. Yes.
Yeah, as you work on the signal upgrades, will you be looking at walk signals too? For example, I know Connect Downtown recommends implementing leading pedestrian signals at all those intersections. Is that going to be implemented as the car signals are upgraded, or how's that go?
So you're setting me up perfectly here. Absolutely, and as part of Connect Downtown, just last week we rolled out our final LPI to cover 104 of the 108 signals downtown. The last 4 need some pedestrian upgrades for ramps that we'll be doing later this summer, and then we'll have LPIs at those as well. But yes, going through this, it's looking not only at those vehicle operations, pedestrian, transit, emergency vehicle as well. Yes.
Is the fiber mostly overhead attachments?
Great question. So initially, for time's sake, we're going aerial for the majority of this. As these all-access corridor projects progress, we'll be burying conduit, and during that, rerouting the fiber underground. Obviously, working closely with NES, we're meeting with them June 12th. Von Charles, Joey Streisel. So if you'd like to be involved in those conversations, let us know. Happy to have an advocate.
Part of it is also tied to system protection and communications. I was in that department for 20 years,
Okay.
and Von Charles is my manager.
Perfect.
I apologize. Derek, real quick question. As far as the lead pedestrian intervals, understanding the core of downtown and how Choose How You Move intersects with kind of existing programmatic efforts around high crash, high fatality, or near misses, which I know we're trying to collect better data on. Can you speak to the integration of, say, like Vision Zero plan and how, when aligned and overlapping with this program, and as well in our centers where we anticipate with increasing development, we'll have higher pedestrian activity, like in more suburban centers. What is kind of the order of operations to bring those online, please? Thank you.
Great question. So currently, NDOT's working on our 3MP plan, I'm going to get the name wrong again. I'll help you out. All right. Multimodal yes. This is when I need the help, yeah. Master plan. And that's going to be an overarching planning document that'll incorporate not only Choose How You Move, but our Vision Zero plan, our walk and bike plan, really an umbrella to bring across these different plans that we've been working on under one group, so that we're prioritizing, everything we do is going to have Vision Zero elements. Some of that prioritization I was speaking about earlier on the NDOT side, and we know the mayor's office feels the same way, looking at, as we work this out, where are we seeing the crashes now? Where do we have those fatalities? That's where we know we need to focus our efforts now, so that as Choose How You Move develops, not only are we getting access to everyone, but it's possible to do in a safe manner.
If I may, just one quick follow-up as far as kind of integration into Ms. Sussman's earlier point, I think it's really important for kind of public consumption and awareness and just from an accountability standpoint, right? Like we have programmatic pots of money that are funded through the capital improvements budget and the capital spending plan. We have these dollars that are from, our extra increment of funding. We have extra increments in our business improvement districts, right? And so I don't know if how we currently map things. I know the 3MP is moving towards trying to kind of centralize and pull all that together because we've had lots of different plans and bits and pieces, and it's hard to kind of articulate how all this is coordinating, but it absolutely is. And to the extent that we can visually show that in our kind of mapping that we have or our online platforms, right, that, I don't know if it's color coding or shapes or whatever, but, this project is funded by Chime, but it also is, Vision Zero, or it's from the traffic calming bucket, because I know, part of this important coordinative role is really optimizing all the taxpayer money to deliver faster and in a more coordinated fashion. So I think there's so much happening. There's such a level of complexity that I think it's important that, we are able to articulate it, our council members are, and that there is a sort of resource to point people to so you can go there and say, hey, I've seen this thing happening. Is that a Vision Zero thing? Is that a Chime thing? So that it's just kind of, it's there 24/7, accountable in public. And that might be more directed to this team here, but it kind of goes to a lot of these different capital things that, you're coordinating.
So I think it's a great flag. One of the items we've identified for both new communication staff at some point in the chief program officer's space, but also for our program management team externally, is to help us figure out a performance management strategy, but also a transparency strategy. So thinking about a dashboarding type system that hopefully is integrated with our both financial systems, but also capital projects management systems, so that literally there is a layer of that is accessible in a very real-time sense to the public. Now, there's a lot of information we'll be tracking that's probably not useful to the public. And so thinking through, again, how are we integrating those systems, but also making it meaningful and understandable for the public is something we'll be thinking about.
I appreciate that. Just to put a point on it, but because we have had kind of multiple mappings, multiple plans, updates to plans, often like you're in the roadway because it's a water project, or, whether it's layers or otherwise. It's just, it to me seems like a layer of complexity that you can't all kind of put it on one map, even though there is the need to kind of collectively pull it together. So I look forward to understanding how that's coming together. Thank you so much.
Yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go right ahead. I'll follow you.
Okay, mine's real quick. Just a high-level timeline, Derek, on Main Gallatin. I know it was originally conceived as something would be in the ground this calendar year, but that was before Chime passed. If you could just share a little.
Nope, good question. So right now we're moving towards 30% design plans towards the end of the summer. And you're all going to probably hear me speak plenty about percentage of design plans. When that comes to transportation, broadly what that means, 30%, think two-dimensional, laying out what that cross-section is. 60%, that's when we're getting to the three-dimensional world, understanding impacts to utilities, right-of-way, and then 90% is essentially the final plan. Let's get those final review comments before we go out and construct. Gallatin, Maine, very likely going to be constructed in two phases. Phase one, the phase that we'll be able to move quicker on, is within the existing right-of-way. And then phase two will come back in the future, following closely. That'll be including purchasing any right-of-way that is needed, a process that frankly can take quite a bit of time, especially in fairly dense areas like we're going to be working on. So we expect to see utility work the end of this construction year within that phase one portion, not within new right-of-way, and then major work growing from there.
You have you have $500 million in the budget for design or analysis or planning of some type. and I'm trying to determine where that figure came from. Do you have a consultant on board already? And that's their price? Or is this going to be a competitive bid? And, yeah, I mean, why isn't it 750 million or 250 million?
Is this the signal planning piece specifically?
It was on one of your slides.
Yes. Yes, so we have 500,000.
Smart signals planning.
Right, for smart signals planning. So that's the number that our internal staff came up based on those 3 tasks that we knew we were going to have to execute. So that's really money that we are looking to get under contract, hopefully in the next couple days here, and start spending that money over the next 6 to 7 months. As previously mentioned, a lot of the work we do is through what we call our on-call contracts, where we essentially, shouldn't say pre-qualify, but we do a bid for an IDIQ contract out to various professional services firms, bring them on, and then we're able to assign individual projects to them without having to go back through the procurement process. So we're actually in the middle of doing a large-scale advertisement. We received bids back from, I think, about 30 firms. So we're looking at building out a very large bench there so that as this planning and design work comes in, instead of having to go through the procurement process for every single project, I think we still will for the very, very large ones. But for smaller ones, things we're looking to move quickly, we'll be able to go to that bench, keep things moving.
So that's something you already have set aside?
Yes, that 500,000 came through in the
500
supplemental.
million. Oh, it is 500,000. I'm sorry. Good. That makes me feel a lot better. Yeah.
I would have been a lot happier with the 500 million.
Yes.
So,
we understand. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, what percentage do we have, like what percentage or how many smart signals do we have right now as we speak?
Good question. So we've been working on a lot of this new technology over the past 2 to 3 years, really on a pilot basis. So we have elements of smart signals technology. I think what the final piece will be at dozens of signals, but I don't think there's one signal in Davidson County right now that's going to look like what we're deploying.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not really familiar with how y'all coordinate signals and how communications go, but I guess that's a long conversation I'd be really interested in. And on the record, I said Bon Charles was my manager. He's our vice president of the section I'm at. So I just want, since it's being recorded, I do need to correct
Good
that.
clarification. All right. Any last questions? Well, I'll turn that one over.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I want to say thank you. I spent a full half hour over, and I want to be respectful of your time while also being respectful of how deeply engaged everyone is already. And so thank you, because we will not make a habit of this, but I'll just say we're just really absorbed and excited about the details. The other thing I'll say is that myself, while I'm not full-time quite yet, but I will be in the coming weeks, and Kendra and Michael are here to receive and to hear. This is a body from which we want to hear recommendations and we want to hear feedback. It's pretty simple to get a hold of any Metro employee, first name, last name at nashville.gov. So don't hesitate to reach out to the three of us, even if you have feedback coming out of today or have additional questions. We'll certainly circulate the deck. You have the set of bylaws proposed. And I don't know, Michael, if you have one sentence that you want to leave folks with.
Just please review them and we will discuss more at the next meeting.
When is the next meeting? Like, is this a monthly commitment, a bi-monthly?
We're examining quarterly. And so I think what we'd like to do is sit down and look at what kind of progress we're hoping to have before we see you again, and then decide, is that top of quarter, bottom of quarter, summer schedules, all those flavors, and we'll come back to you with a proposal. I'm sorry?
I think the bylaws this quarter.
Yes, yeah, that's what we're sort of proposing and hope to drive towards. Yes, sir.
Since we're dealing with transportation, I don't know how many of us have actually rode the bus. I haven't in decades. Is there a way we could do that as
Yes.
a homework assignment so
Yes.
we can have a better feel?
Yes, I love that homework assignment. I'll just sort of share transparently with you, and the departments already know this. My first week, I'm planning on spending a lot of time with our field staff, our field operations, riding the bus, sort of being out there on roadways, and I very much encourage you to do the same. And feel free to invite one of us to come along if you'd like to do that. I think we can be in touch with WeGo and others on coordinating any of that for you if you'd like. And I do think, in our hopes and dreams, perhaps we will do a field advisory meeting where we are actually touring and looking at things rather than sitting in a windowless room. Any other questions?
I guess just to clarify quickly on bylaws.
Yeah.
Having received the draft at this meeting, is your instruction then that we would compile notes or feedback and discuss that publicly at the next meeting, or in the intervening time, is it appropriate to send questions, suggestions to staff regarding the bylaws prior to the next meeting to inform that meeting?
I think we would appreciate thoughts or reactions before the next meeting so we can kind of gauge how it's landing with you all, and then have open discussion at the next meeting on some of the details. So there's two things that are highlighted in there that I think we'll really have to work through with you all. But there's also all the other elements that are in the bylaws that we can visit with you.
So the thought for next meeting would be a discussion around maybe the feedback that you've received and whatever happens there. And we would not be voting on the bylaws at that time, but rather later, because I'm just wanting to kind of think of the order of operations. Because if next time we are operating without bylaws, I understand this is the introductory meeting. I mean, I'm not saying that's not okay, but I just wanted to, if we're going to be on a quarterly cadence, if next time is discussion, working on them. I worry sometimes when you have a foundational document like this, that it's a little bit challenging when you have to do sort of a public discussion about it, to move to a place where you can go to a vote on it and feel that like all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. So I guess I would elevate to the body that some sort of, before we get on that quarterly cadence, there might be in these foundational times, we might need to kind of come together for just a quicker touch base to like get the bylaws firmed up potentially. Yeah.
I disagree.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can discuss the bylaws and adopt them at the next meeting. These are not complex bylaws. And not only that, but to continue to delay it is not, I don't think it inures to the benefit of our body.
So I think what we'd like to do is to ask, you have 3 homework assignments that I'll review quickly, but to ask you to prioritize this one along with the other 2. We'll see what kind of feedback we get. We are hoping to move in a very streamlined way here, and obviously, as you are asking of us to implement swiftly, we are asking of you to help us in that journey. So review and let us know if you have feedback, assessing the amount of discussion and changes we might be making. I think the goal would be hopefully to vote at the next meeting, but we can sort of determine what it will take to get there. Your 2 other homework, for those of who are listening, is Michael sent around a survey in the email with the agenda, asking a little bit more about you as we're trying to learn about you. And so please take a moment to fill that out. And then number 3, if you haven't recently experienced WeGo's operations, please find some time to do that as well. And then I'll be reaching out over the coming months as well as I start to learn Nashville. So if your bonus question on your homework assignment is if you have things you think I need to be doing to learn Nashville, you can send them my way. I'm building the opposite of a bucket list. It's sort of a growing list. So send your recommendations my way. Yes, sir.
Real quick, if I might say this, I actually think it would be appropriate for us to approve draft bylaws today because it gives us some guidance as to how we move. Right now, we're at a whelm. So I would suggest that we approve and then underline the word draft. We all know there are draft bylaws, but it gives us some guidance as to how we move forward. And I do agree that should be sent out we should be sending to whomever you designate our recommended changes for the bylaws, and whether we call a special meeting to deal with just bylaws or we meet at the regular scheduled meeting that is already in the draft bylaws, that we move forward in that manner. That would be my suggestion. Actually, I'd put it in a form of motion, Mr. Chairman, if that's possible.
I did hear a motion. Is there a second? seconded. Is there a vote? All in favor of draft bylaws? Let's do hands for anyone who is not in favor. Not in favor. Okay, so draft bylaws adopted. We'd like you to send.
Would you record me as an abstention? I'm just going to abstain on that.
Oh, I have an abstention as well.
Abstention? Okay. What we will then do is ask you to review and send comments to Michael, who will be bird dogging this for us. If you do that expeditiously, we'll then be able to sort of come back and hopefully keep the process moving in parallel with preparations for the next meeting. Okay, is there anything else? Let me just end again with a thank you. I appreciate your time and your engagement and your enthusiasm. Thanks, everyone.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.